What are some red flags when you're starting to meet someone? Because initially, you've mentioned in the book, they're very charming, they're very captivating. How can you sort of start seeing those red flags and sort of, because it's sort of a fluctuating pattern, how can you sort of start to spot out like, okay, maybe this isn't like, when should I start standing up for myself and saying this is not acceptable?
You never say it to them because they're not going to listen. When you say it's not acceptable, you say it within yourself. And that's already hard because people, as they come into these relationships, like I say in the book, we're attracted to them because they're charming and they're charismatic and they're confident. We're often taught that this is exactly the person we should be looking for. They're often also very successful too. So all these boxes are getting ticked. And then it doesn't start badly. These relationships, especially adult onset narcissistic relationships, start out quite nicely. You feel like this person gets you like no one else ever has. They're so fun. They're so romantic. You really feel like you've sometimes been swept into a fairy tale or some sort of idealized situation, right? And so it's almost like there's this process people go through where in the sort of love bombing stage, it almost feels like it's close to 100% good. As weeks go by, it becomes 90% good, 10% bad, 80% good, 20% bad, 70%, 30%. And then you start getting to 50%. Then you start getting to 20% good and 80% bad. But it was a gradual titration. And as that titration happened, and it happened gradually, the other person in that relationship starts justifying, because it's not always bad. It's 90% good, 10% bad. Who complains about that? That's every relationship. So now the justifications, though, become part of that relationship. They didn't mean it. They had a tough childhood. They're working so hard to provide for us. We had so much fun. I love having sex with them, whatever the reasons. And there could be all of these and then some, that we start making justifications. And this is where it starts getting really dark. People start blaming themselves in the relationship. Maybe this is my fault. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough. Maybe I didn't say that right. And when you throw in the gaslighting dynamic, where basically the narcissistic person throws back on the other person and says, I never said that. That never happened. And I think you have a memory problem or something. There's something wrong with you. Now they're telling you you're impaired. You're even more destabilized. You internalize that. Before long, you have this inversion where the person in the narcissistic relationship feels like they're responsible for this problem. Until a person gets educated about what narcissism is, because people are feeling it. They're feeling it in their body. These people get sick. People in these narcissistic relationships start getting sick in a variety of ways. Some subtle, some more obvious. Some people say I have more trouble sleeping because I'm ruminating. I'm not eating as well. I'm not taking care of myself. I don't talk to my friends as much. All the stuff that's essential to self-care, but it's all happening slowly. So that idea of finally identifying that this behavior is unacceptable, sometimes it happens from the outside. It might be a friend who says, whoa, like, is that how he always talks to you? Because of course, the narcissistic person isn't going to let that many people get close to your relationship. And you'll say, what? And your friend might say, that wasn't okay. And that's sometimes the first light switch moment where a person might even say, no, it's how it is. But when that friend goes away, they're going to say, And when those light switches start popping on, that's where it even gets harder, because people are like, okay, is it me? Is it them? Am I being sensitive? So this isn't as much as I say we have to recognize behavior is unacceptable, it's not that easy. As it gets worse and worse, there's usually a rock bottom for everyone in these relationships. Sometimes it's infidelity, sometimes it's physical violence, sometimes it's financial misbehavior, and sometimes it's just death by 1,000 cuts. It's just how many times you can bear up against this.
Yeah. You mentioned the physical thing, and I can guarantee you we all see these victims of narcissistic relationships, because I see plenty of patients who have pelvic pain, who have overactive bladder, who have interstitial cystitis, sort of urologic issues that are sort of on this chronic pain continuum, and they often have a lot of comorbid conditions that are like anxiety, fibromyalgia, migraines, right? These sort of conditions that we talk about with central sensitization or things like that. But I wonder if really one of the big root causes is that they're in these narcissistic relationships. And I can guarantee you, I've never asked anyone specifically about narcissism. I've asked, is your relationship good, right? And most people will say, yeah, it's fine, or, we're okay. But most people are not divulging So, they're very in details about their relationship when they're at the urologist, unless it's sexual. So in terms of questions that I can ask or other clinicians can ask, if we see patients that we might be concerned are having bad relationships at home, that might trigger at least a light bulb for us to say, maybe you should, read your book or assess this.
I mean, again, you said you already are asking how is your relationship? I think what you don't ever want to ask the person is your relationship good? Because you've already now primed the yes, versus if you ask, how is your relationship? You might get more of like, it's fine. So you're still going to get that kind of that. Because a lot of folks in these relationships aren't aware. In fact, the people who have more physiological fallout, as you're talking about, central sensitization, whether it's migraines alongside any number of urologic issues, when you see that, I think the more we see that transference of the physical pain into the physiological, those are the clients who might be least likely that they're not in a healthy relationship. One thing we're working on, I'm actually building it out now, and we're doing some of the original piloting of it, right? The initial piloting of it is developing instruments. Like, so you can actually have this in the packet of pre-check-in before you see the patient, or even as they check in, like checklists that they could fill in. So that then, instead of them having to answer this very broad question, how's your relationship, or is your relationship going well, or even is your relationship going badly, there would be a chance to get a more quantitative indicator, or even look at those responses and see that when you bring it down into its component processes, what they're answering fine to actually may not be healthy. The other thing to ask someone is, do you feel emotionally safe in your relationship? Do you feel like you're able to express yourself openly in your relationship? That would be a different way to ask that question, because when we think of safety, people immediately go to, well, I don't think they're going to beat me up. It's more of a, if you say emotionally safe, do you feel like you can share of yourself fully? That might give people a little bit of pause and say, well, it's we don't really talk about that stuff. And then you could go a step further and say, why not? Like, well, but the problem is, I also know that physicians are on insurance, and you get how long, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever tiny amount of time you get. So I'm well aware of the limits that are also on physicians. So something that can also happen, instead of asking every patient the question and hoping to get an answer, is providing psychoeducation to all of them. So it's whether it's the handouts that are available in the waiting room, whether it's the stuff something that's put into their hands, where it may not even be so much that you're asking them this, because many won't give you an accurate answer, and not because they're even being resistant or in denial. They just haven't identified it as such, that if they're being shown something, being offered something, that they might say, that's good. I might need to pay attention to this, because I have to be frank with you, when a client gets to the point, or patient gets to the point where they are thinking, this is a disaster, my marriage is a disaster, like this is awful, and this person mistreats me, you might actually start seeing some more physiological regulation at that point, because now that awareness, I think that the brain is going to process that very differently than the absolute everything's fine.